Ferrari is doing something it hasn't always had to do: manage two very different conversations simultaneously. On one side, there's the Luce, its first fully electric production car, a project that carries the weight of the brand's future positioning and all the scrutiny that comes with a legendary performance manufacturer committing seriously to electrification. On the other side, there's business as usual: beautiful, fast, combustion-powered cars that do exactly what Ferrari has always done better than almost anyone else. The Amalfi Spider sits firmly in the second conversation, and it's a reminder that while the Luce generates the headlines about where Ferrari is going, there remains plenty of life in where Ferrari has always been. The Spider arrives roughly 8 months after the Amalfi Coupe made its debut, which is a fairly typical cadence for Ferrari when it comes to introducing the open-top version of an established model. The Coupe establishes the character, the engineering package, and the design language, and the Spider then takes all of that and adds the one element that a significant portion of Ferrari buyers consider non-negotiable: the ability to remove the roof and let the engine do its thing with nothing between you and the sky. It replaces the Roma Spider, which itself was a well-regarded car, and the relationship between the two generations follows a familiar pattern: same core philosophy, meaningfully updated in almost every direction. The design carries forward the Amalfi Coupe's visual identity, with the adjustments that a convertible body requires, and the result is a car that looks proportionally right rather than like a coupe with the top removed as an afterthought. The front end is notably cleaner than what it replaces. Slimmer headlamp units sharpen the face considerably, and the smooth, grille-less nose gives the whole front fascia a contemporary confidence that some of Ferrari's older designs, for all their drama, couldn't quite claim. Revised bumpers and a more sculpted body profile work together to give the Amalfi Spider an aerodynamic coherence that you can read from the styling rather than having to take on faith from a press release. The 20-inch alloy wheels complete the picture, sitting within those arches with the kind of purposeful presence that makes the proportions feel planted and assured rather than delicate. The retractable soft top is the engineering piece that most buyers will interact with most often, and Ferrari has handled it well. 4 tailored fabric colors are offered, plus 2 variants of a technical fabric with a distinctive woven pattern, enough choice to personalize the car meaningfully without the options list becoming overwhelming. The mechanism itself takes 13.5 seconds to complete its operation, which is fast enough to feel fluid rather than mechanical, and it can be triggered at speeds up to 37 miles per hour. That last detail matters more in practice than it might seem on paper. The ability to drop the roof while rolling to a stop at traffic lights or raise it quickly when a weather change announces itself without warning removes one of the small frustrations that has historically made some convertibles feel slightly inconvenient in everyday use. The 5-layer roof construction is the detail that distinguishes a genuinely refined convertible from one that simply has a roof that moves. Ferrari's approach here draws on the system previously used in the Portofino, building a structure that provides acoustic insulation and thermal performance closer to a retractable hardtop than a traditional soft top. When the roof is up, the cabin is quiet enough and well insulated enough that longer journeys in cooler weather don't feel like a compromise you're tolerating for the sake of the car's identity. That's the standard a grand touring convertible has to meet. It needs to work as an enclosed car on a cold motorway and as an open-air experience on a warm coastal road, without feeling like it's sacrificing too much in either direction. The Amalfi Spider's roof construction is genuinely targeted at that balance rather than just adequate at it. Inside, the cabin architecture matches with the Amalfi Coupe established, which is to say it's considerably more modern than what Ferrari was producing even a few years ago. The 2+2 seating configuration is retained, a practical acknowledgement that occasional rear accommodation has value for a certain kind of buyer, even if the rear seats are best understood as occasional rather than genuinely useful for adults on longer journeys. The redesigned center console is the visual anchor of the interior, built around a 10.25-inch infotainment display that handles navigation, media, and connectivity without dominating the space in the way that some manufacturers' large central screens tend to. The proportions feel considered, rather than simply large for its own sake. The instrument cluster in front of the driver runs to 15.6 inches of configurable digital display, which gives the driver a genuinely flexible way to present the information that matters most depending on what kind of driving they're doing. On a track day, the layout might prioritize different data than it would on a mountain road or a motorway cruise, and the ability to configure that is something drivers who spend real time in their Ferraris will appreciate. The passenger side 8.8-inch screen is a thoughtful addition that addresses one of the quieter criticisms sometimes directed at high-performance cars, that the passenger experience can feel passive to the point of irrelevance. Giving the passenger their own interface showing speed, navigation, and vehicle information creates a sense of shared participation that makes the car feel less like a driver's machine with a seat bolted in for company. Driver assistance technology is integrated throughout, which is now a standard expectation for cars at this price level, regardless of performance positioning. The Manettino dial on the steering wheel remains the signature interface for dynamic control, wet, comfort, sport, race, and ESC off settings, each altering throttle response, traction control thresholds, and suspension behavior to match conditions and driver intent. It's a system Ferrari has refined over many generations, and it works because it's genuinely intuitive in use. Rotating through the modes takes a moment rather than a journey through menus, and the changes each setting produces are meaningful rather than subtle enough to question whether anything actually happened. Cargo space is 255 liters with the roof closed, dropping to 172 liters when the top is down and its mechanism occupies the space that luggage would otherwise use. Neither figure is going to impress anyone shopping primarily for practicality, but then the Amalfi Spider is not attempting to make a practicality argument. It's a Ferrari Grand Touring convertible, and the buyers considering it have made a prior peace with the idea that some trips will require creative packing or a separate vehicle for the luggage. The 172-liter figure, when open, is the more relevant one for the kind of weekend escapes this car is built for, and while it's modest, it's workable for two people traveling with reasonable expectations about what they're loading into a sports car. The powertrain is a twin-turbocharged 3.9-liter V8, producing 631 horsepower and 560 foot-pounds of torque, delivered to the rear wheels through an 8-speed dual-clutch automatic transmission. Those numbers represent a 20-horsepower step up over the Roma Spider, matching the Amalfi Coupe's output and reflecting the general upward pressure on performance figures across Ferrari's range as each generation succeeds the last. The 0 to 62 miles per hour sprint takes 3.3 seconds, which matches the Coupe despite the additional structural reinforcement and roof hardware the Spider carries. The engineering required to achieve that parity is considerable. Convertibles inherently require additional stiffening in the body to compensate for the absence of a fixed roof structure, and that weight penalty usually shows somewhere in the performance figures. The fact that it doesn't show here in the acceleration numbers is a measure of how carefully the Spider has been developed rather than simply derived from its fixed roof sibling. What the Amalfi Spider ultimately represents is Ferrari doing what it has always done at the top of its non-flagship range: build a car that is fast, beautiful, sonically rewarding, and complete in a way that makes the price feel less like a number and more like an exchange. The V8's soundtrack with the roof down on a clear road remains one of the more visceral automotive experiences available at any price, and the Amalfi Spider frames that experience with a level of refinement and technological sophistication that the Roma Spider couldn't match. As Ferrari works through its electric future with the Luce, the Amalfi Spider is a confident and accomplished statement that the brand's traditional strengths are nowhere near exhausted.